Is it time for a mind shift? If you don't know what that means, then join your host, Dr. Clint Haycock, a former evangelical Christian pastor and Bible college teacher of over 20 years, along the journey of deconstruction and reconstruction of faith, life, religion, and spirituality.
I'm so happy to welcome back Chris Shelton of the Sensibly Speaking podcast. Welcome, Chris, to Mind Shift Podcast.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for welcoming me back. I'm very happy to be here. It's been too long.
Yes, it really has been way too long, actually. Now, the reason I tapped you, Chris, was because I've been doing a ton of research on QAnon. What is QAnon and all the rest of it, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. But the reason I thought, I want to talk to Chris Shelton is because, of course, as we've said before, you come out of Scientology. You're an ex-Scientologist. I'm an ex-evangelical. We've compared notes many times, and we realized that our backgrounds were not that dissimilar from a cult psychology point of view.
That's right.
And that's what I've realized about QAnon. I believe it's a dangerous cult, and I thought, okay, what better person to discuss this, dissect this than with Chris?
Beautiful. Yeah, let's do it. I've been reading you've been making copious notes on this, and there have been articles across the internet. Mm-hmm. People are starting to take this a little seriously. Vice did a whole thing on it. BBC did. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of information out there about this, and it is quite disturbing.
It is.
From a certain point of view. I mean, you can look at it and relegate it to the trash bin or go, well, they're just a bunch of nutters, or it's just this little small fringe group. But it's a phenomenon is what it is. It's a social phenomenon. It happens. It happens routinely and regularly that conspiracy theories rise because of social events and human psychology. And so I relish the opportunity to talk about this stuff and break it down.
It is fascinating. There's certainly been, I've seen two examples of why QAnon is dangerous. On the one hand, it has led to multiple people resorting to real world violence. There's been numerous cases of, a woman in Austin, Texas, just not long ago, got in her car and ran down two different people, ended up ramming a car in a parking lot. And her goal was to save the children from pedophiles. And she was influenced by QAnon. And there's been several examples of that. There's also been example after example of the fact that it has destroyed people's relationships with friends, family, loved ones.
Yeah, there's even a whole Reddit thread.
Yeah.
Or forum on this. And, there isn't a Reddit, there's a Reddit forum on Scientology, but not from the people who have been disconnected from Scientologists, right? It's a forum about, bitching and moaning and complaining about Scientology. There's a whole community of people who have been shunned, disconnected, familial relationships cut off by QAnon. So it's enough of a phenomenon that exists, and it's not a tiny little forum either. Mm-hmm. So I think there's really something to this.
It really is. And it's making inroads into the Republican Party. There's at least 20, if not maybe as many as 35 current congressional candidates who are openly espousing QAnon theories. It's also making inroads into the evangelical church, which is another fascinating angle that I'm sure we'll discuss in a bit more. So what's it all about? What is QAnon? So in your research and stuff that I sent you, were you able to get a handle on kind of the core belief system of QAnon? What is it?
Yeah. No, this is really quite something. I mean, QAnon in and of itself is a fluid, still developing, and ever-changing set of ideas that form this umbrella idea of there being within the power circles of the world, especially within Washington D.C. We have a group of child slavery trafficking pedophile ring of people, right? And then this apparently is being fought tooth and nail by Donald Trump, who is the savior figure of this conspiracy theory. And he's not the leader of the conspiracy, but he is the savior figure of the conspiracy, and that's important. I guess in the same way that Jesus is the savior figure for Christianity, right? And in this thing. And so Trump becomes the central heroic figure, and this whole conspiracy theory is sort of this epic tale of how Trump is going to take down these DC power brokers who are involved in sexual abuse and all this other stuff. And it seems to be the thing that seems to be growing the biggest out of this right now, that's developing the most clicks and retweets and stuff, is the fact that it is revolving around this pedophilia, that this is about kids. And even down to, apparently some part of this is that they are not only sexually using these kids, but are somehow extracting chemicals from them, from their young bodies. I did not look into the medical science of this because it's just so outlandishly stupid. But they are not only torturing and assaulting these kids, but they are apparently extracting this chemical that is supposed to enhance or extend life. And so all these old people are now going to live forever because they're, diddling kids or something. So you get an almost sci-fi aspect to this sort of fantastical elements to it, if you go all the way down the well. I think at the fringe ends of this, at the outside edges of this is where you can find some facts, some real world events that seem to match up with and align to the conspiracy, which gives it more legs, specifically the Jeffrey Epstein scandal right now. Because you have, now, of course, these guys are wonderfully brilliant at avoiding any facts or anything that's going to in any way detract from the broad conspiracy narrative. So even amongst the Epstein scandal, pictures of Trump or Trump being associated with Epstein are negated. No, that's not part of the problem. Clinton being in Epstein's plane is the problem. Hillary being connected with Epstein is the problem. That's the problem, right? So Trump remains Teflon Trump through all of this. There isn't any part of this that you're going to get these people to confess to or see that there is any, that there are any facts involved in any of this that are against Trump, right? It's a very closed system of belief. So that's it in a nutshell, as I understand it, in terms of the belief that there are variations on this. There's other rabbit holes involved with it you can go down, but it has to do with this global cabal of people who are. It's not just in D.C., it's not just in the United States, but apparently that's where it's really focused most heavily.
As you say, the fact that there are people that you can point to, Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, he's a British royal. And there's clear links to him and Epstein, this pedophile ring. What I've heard with the Trump connection is that someone said to me just last night, so this is spreading. I was having a conversation out in our courtyard with a British friend of mine, and she was totally bought into the whole cabal conspiracy theory, pedophile ring thing. And I said, yeah, but Trump was an associate of Epstein. And she said, no. Well, he was, but actually it was all those years ago. He was actually investigating it to bring it down even then.
Right.
You see, that's the connection, Chris.
Oh my God. You know why I have to laugh at that is because that is almost word for word how Scientology, how the Church of Scientology tried to spin L. Ron Hubbard's involvement in the occult. Because it came out in court very clearly, undeniably so, that L. Ron Hubbard was mixed up in the occult prior to inventing Dianetics and Scientology. And he was doing sex magic, blood magic rituals, right? And it was pretty gross and gory stuff. And so the church, the way the church spun it was to say L. Ron Hubbard was working secretly in tandem with the police and the FBI to bust up a satanic ring. And he went in there, premeditatively to do that.
Right. He was researching it. It's all research, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. It has nothing to do with reality, right? I find the parallels as you look at these things over the decades as they go from one generation to another, how you see the same lines and the same way of thinking recur. And I find that fascinating, in terms of psychology.
The only thing I would add to as a good description of QAnon, There's a couple of other elements I think that are important to put in there as well, and that is that this secret shadowy cabal of it involves Democrats, Hollywood celebrities, mega billionaires, elites. They are Satan worshipers too.
That's right.
Part of the abuse of children and the sex trafficking and the murder of children to extract this chemical they call adrenochrome from their pituitary glands. That's what they're supposedly doing. Part of the satanic worship. And what's going to happen as Trump one day is going to bring them all down. He's going to expose them all. This is what they call the Great Awakening. And then it's going to be this event called the Storm. And there's going to be this huge expose where they're all going to be exposed for who they really are by Trump. And this is the deep state. This is part of the deep state. When you hear Trump and others talk about the deep state, they're waging war to try to bring Trump down. But of course, he's trying to bring them down, and he's going to prevail, as you say, as the savior. And then you've got this person, Q. So who is Q? Because they're all following Q. That's another part of this conspiracy theory. What have you been able to find out about Q?
Tell people. Well, yeah, you should tell people what we know about him, because it's almost nothing. Mm-hmm. We know almost nothing about the source of this entire thing. We know when, I think 2017 is when the first post.
October 2017, the first Q drop on 4chan. So you have a drop in October 2017, and what they call drops. So yeah, who is Q? We don't know. There's some speculation that it might be Jim Watkins, who's the owner of what used to be 8chan, now 8kun, but no one knows. But what he does is he releases these cryptic drops on places like 4chan, it was 8chan and other places, and they're very cryptic, they're coded, and his followers or her followers will grab these breadcrumbs up and they'll sort of decode them, they'll parse them, and they're always related somehow to Trump, the deep state, this cabal, so this is the plan that Q is dropping these little breadcrumbs for his followers to, race after and find the next one and decode.
That's right. And this is where the cult framework starts coming into play, actually. Mm-hmm. Because, just posting, weird stuff on the internet, well, anybody can do that.
Sure.
But once you get people following you, looking, trying to figure out what this is all about, then you get what's happened organically is fascinating. And I'm going to jump right into it here, where you've got these interpreters, this priest class,
right,
that have sort of organically grown up through YouTube around this conspiracy theory, where they take these Q packets, these dumps, and they're the ones who decide they know what this actually means, because this loaded language is apparently quite deep.
Absolutely.
There's loaded, there's acronyms, and there's loaded language, and there are special coded phrases. And these guys become, I guess there's about 3 or 4 of them who have risen in YouTube as the interpreters of these Q drops. And so they're the ones who are telling people what to actually think about it. And I haven't yet had time, but I'm going to go, pull some of these Q drops and read them for myself to see how do they read compared to these interpretations. Clearly enough that these people buy into it. So it must be hewing the line close enough. But this is where the cult starts, because cults are not just some guy saying stuff and people believing them. There's more to it than that, and it has to do with extremism of belief and abuse, right? And deceit and lying can be abusive behaviors. So when you're dumping data of a questionable nature on the internet, and then you start developing a following and a people who are interpreting your words, and then they're starting to look forward to it, they're contributing their own ideas to it, that's when it becomes codependent. And it does require a codependent relationship. So when we talk about the development of online cults, that's a 21st century phenomena, this is what we're talking about. Is Q is this anonymous, we have no idea who this guy, girl, person, group of people is. Apparently it's untraceable, nobody can figure it out, we don't know. But we do know who these interpreters are. And once you start putting that framework into place and the followers start lining up under the various interpreters, and they prefer this versus this and this kind of thing, then you get a certain degree of infighting, but you get more cooperation and spreading and propagation of this dogma. and it starts becoming a movement. And
Yep.
when it's a movement centered or focused around blatantly false information, which is encouraging real world activism in the form of violence, then you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've got with Q. And it's becoming as you mentioned at the top of the episode here, it's becoming a real world violence problem.
It is. And relationships have been destroyed. Well, the other thing, too, is Q has predicted many, many things that have not come to pass at all. And this is part of the cognitive dissonance. It reminds me of the book When Prophecy Fails by Festinger.
Yep.
Because, in fact, the original Q drop in 2017 was a statement whereby he said that Hillary Clinton was going to be arrested and extradited and riots were going to break out and all this kind of thing, which, of course, never happened. Many, many Q prophecies have utterly been false. They've not come to pass at all. But, of course, if you confront the Q adherents with this logic and say, look, this is your prophet. He supposedly knows everything. He's deep in the inside of Washington, D.C., or somewhere with a Q level clearance. That's what the Q stands for, is supposedly his clearance level, security level. They say, well, he uses deception purposely. That's the point, to throw people off the trail. It's not that he's wrong. They're going to double down, and they're going to find another way to explain it. Logic means nothing. Facts mean nothing. You cannot get through to them. It literally is like talking to a brainwashed cultist who is just impervious to logic, facts, reason, whatever. You cannot get through.
That's right. And it's not like talking to that. It is talking to that.
Well, it is.
I mean, let's be clear.
Let's face it.
Yeah, let's just call a fact, right? We got a cult here. We have an internet cult. And it's a destructive cult in that it lines up with certain, markers that we have laid out in terms of us versus them thinking, black and white thinking, inculcating, this sort of like extremist form of belief, which results in extremist forms of acting out. Right? It's not just a belief set. It's what they do with it. And what is being done with this is not good stuff,
Exactly.
Because the entire basis of it is false. I mean, this is the problem with it and it's funny how I say something like that in the face of Jeffrey Epstein's case. But, this is a perfect example where,
There's just so much, isn't there?
I know. It can be very frustrating to try to break it down sometimes because it's so obviously wrong, and yet you have to take the time. It's like fact-checking or debunking. It takes 5 hours to debunk something that it takes 5 seconds for somebody to say, But in this case, yes, there are pedophiles. There are people who diddle kids. There are people who go after teens. There are really gross, monstrous people out there, and some of them are in the world of politics. And that's because you have power, money, influence, and opportunity. So you have, people who can rise to positions of power and take advantage of those positions. To take that piece of truth, which I just said, right? Very, very true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then expand it out to a global cabal.
Yeah, Satan worshiping pedophiles.
Organized.
Yeah.
Which consist of Satan worshipers. I mean, we're being so specific about the claim here with this, right? And that this is something that, and that it's only the Democrats, of course. This is Hillary. Yeah, exactly. So this is something that first starts playing on the pro-Trump, anti-Hillary sentiment. Mm-hmm. That's where it really gains root.
Actually, yeah, that's right.
So clearly we're talking about a conspiracy amongst a core of Trump supporters. You're not going to find progressives and left-wing Hillary supporters getting involved with this. The arch enemy of this whole thing is Hillary.
Because every Q drop is, well, not everyone, but overwhelmingly they are pro-Trump and anti-Democrat. So if you just look at the constellation of Q drops in the aggregate, they're universally pro-Trump and anti-Hillary, anti-Democratic. So whoever Q is, you can kind of get a sense of their profile, like a psychological profiler. One of the things I was going to say, going back to your comment about the origins of this thing, if you look at the timeline, because we haven't talked about Pizzagate yet, but that plays an integral role. And the reason that is because I realized as I was doing my research that, the first Q drop was in October of 2017. But the Pizzagate scandal or conspiracy theory was around in October of 2016. So the Pizzagate scandal goes like this. It says that when the Russians hacked into the Democratic National Convention servers, they released them on WikiLeaks. And these people started going through these John Podesta's emails, and they started making these cryptic connections. Every time he mentioned the word pizza, pizza equals girls and pasta equals boys. Everything was coded in loaded language, so they thought. And they somehow connected this with the fact that Hillary Clinton was allegedly running a child sex trafficking ring out of the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C. That's where the whole thing comes from. And you have a guy who goes in there in 2016 with an AR-15, December of 2016, looking to save the children, and he shoots the place up. Luckily, he didn't kill anybody. He got arrested, and he's in prison now. But the QAnon theory comes out a year after that, the first Q drop. But the core of it really is the heart of the Pizzagate stuff that, yes, as you say, there's this cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who are running this shadowy organization worldwide now. But really, I think Pizzagate is at the core of it. And somehow the murder of Seth Rich was involved in that too, because the theory goes he was on his way to blow the whistle on Hillary Clinton and all this when he was murdered by her. He was rubbed out. And so that feeds into the whole Pizzagate, QAnon stuff as well. So it's a tangled web. We are just going to take a short break here in my conversation with Chris Shelton. I hope you're enjoying and getting a lot of information so far out of our discussion, our exploration of QAnon and what it is all about. And in the second half, what we're going to do is we're going to delve more into the cult psychology aspect of QAnon and unpack it and explain it a bit more for you. And so the hope is that you'll be able to have the critical tools to be able to not only combat the stuff when it comes your way, because it inevitably will. It's growing more and more. It's rather kind of a concerning thing. It's growing worldwide, actually, not just in America. But you probably have someone in your orbit, friends, family members, coworkers, somebody like that who is involved in this stuff. And so how do you talk to them? How do you reason with them? Can you reason with them? And we're going to get more into that in the second half of the show. I just wanted to mention really quickly what's coming up. The next actual episode, this is a bonus episode. I've been doing a lot of bonus episodes, but I've been getting a lot of people wanting to talk to me, so I've had a lot of recordings happen. So I thought, well, let's just get them out as bonus episodes. So I've got an actual recording coming out. The next drop next Friday is with Paul Kivel as we discuss this issue of Christian hegemony. And then I've got an episode with Stephen Tiger. We take a deep dive into some of the theology around Christianity and why it might not be very believable and what some of the problems and issues are around that. So we've got a couple of really good episodes coming up. Oh yeah, and before I forget, let me mention too that last Monday, it was a bank holiday here in the UK near the end of the month of August. Matthew Taylor from the Still Unbelievable podcast came to visit me on the Rock. He was working his way back down from being up north, and he stopped in for a few hours, and we recorded a really great conversation. So look for that one coming up as well in a few weeks with Matthew from the Still Unbelievable podcast. Also, I want to mention that at some point during September here, I will be putting on the Mindshift Podcast Facebook page our conversation that we had last month with Conway and Siegelman as a bonus episode. That's nearly 2 hours long. And also, if you want to catch the conversation that we had earlier in the month of August with Julie Ann Smith, that is also available right now on the Mindshift Podcast Facebook page. So head over there, like the page, and take a look at those videos. And as a matter of fact, on the 6th of September, as I'm doing this recording right now, we're going to have Catherine Stewart as our guest for September's Zoom call. We're going to be talking about her books, The Good News Club and The Power Worshippers. And so at some point, that will also be uploaded on the Mindshift Podcast Facebook page. These are benefits that you get for being a supporter of this show on Patreon. You get to be added to our closed Mindshift Podcast Facebook group, and it's in there that we host our monthly Zoom calls. And in fact, judging from the comments that I get virtually every month from people in the group who drop into the calls, They absolutely love it. And one of the best parts about it is meeting up with the former guests. And as a matter of fact, this guy that I'm talking to now, Chris Shelton, he was on the Mindshift Zoom call just a few months ago. And I think that's also been uploaded to the Facebook page. So if you want to check out our conversation with Chris that we had a while back, you can have a look at that. And speaking of Chris Shelton, let's get on back into our conversation as we continue to unpack the cult psychology of this internet phenomenon known as QAnon.
Well, it was sort of an organic evolution, I guess you could say. And I say organic, I probably should stop using that word in relation to this, actually, because it's very possible that this entire thing is a planned operation. I mean, this is exactly what propaganda looks like. You know, this is the kind of thing you want to have happen if you are an enemy agent or adversary to, let's say, the United States. Now, this itself sounds like a kind of conspiracy theory, except it's not. You know, cyber warfare is a real thing. Propaganda is a real thing. I'm not making these concepts up. And we know down to the street address who the Russians were who were hacking.
The IRA in St. Petersburg.
Exactly.
And some think that this has all the earmarks of Russian intelligence, disinformation.
Oh my God!
And one thing,
all of it. All the way back to the anti-Hillary stuff.
Yeah. They are masters at spreading disinformation, fomenting the already existing racism, the systemic racism, the deep divides politically in America. They're doing it right now. It's being promoted by RT, by Sputnik News, Russian bots on Twitter, so if they're not involved in it from the beginning, they're certainly jumping on the bandwagon and saying, this is great. They're laughing all the way to the bank in a sense and saying, we are loving the fact that America is literally tearing itself apart over stuff like Black Lives Matters and Antifa and all this kind of stuff. Where I used to live in Portland, we had a guy that got killed just the other day that was somehow part of this. Trump supporters drove right through the middle of a Black Lives Matter protest, and it led to a guy getting killed. So it's as you say, real world violence just a few days ago as we're doing this recording.
That's right. And that's the thing about, the really tragic thing about this is that you do have bad actors in other countries and in this one whose interests are to foment or create discord, unrest, civil unrest. And if they could generate, it's almost beyond their wildest dreams when they get something hooking like QAnon. Oh my God, this is exactly what we were hoping would happen.
Gold mine.
Right?
It's a jackpot.
This is like, somebody's got some serious gold stars in their folder from this one, right? That could be an explanation for this. It could also just be some rando 14-year-old in his basement. But I doubt with the complexity of this that it is something like that. I think it's a more savvy operation here. And I'm not saying that it has to be that this is some foreign influence campaign. I'm saying that it could be. And that there are very real reasons to think it could be. It could also be an internal strife, let's create strife campaign. The thing about folks on Trump's side is they are shit stirrers. They are let's stir let's make things, let's blow stuff up. Let's make things crazy. And so it could be something like that, or it could be just regular anarchists, of which there are plenty on boards like 4chan, 8chan, whatever. These are people who just want to watch the world burn. And so and those people do exist.
Absolutely.
In numbers that we would probably find uncomfortable if you start looking at the big picture. So you've got a lot of potential reasons why this could be happening. But it's funny and tragic to me that the very people who will buy into such an involved conspiracy theory won't buy into the more factual, also conspiracy theory that they could just be being influenced by foreign shit stirrers, and they are just being played like a fiddle. And the people who are doing it are laughing, as you said, all the way to the bank or the polls or whatever the end game is of all of this. And these guys are just a bunch of tools. The QAnon followers. Is there really just being a bunch of tools? And it's the tragedy of conspiracy theories is that every single one of them, every single person who buys into a conspiracy theory is doing so because they believe that by knowing and understanding this secret lore, this sacred knowledge, that they have a leg up. They have the advantage. They're the ones who actually see clearly. They're the ones who understand what's going on in the world.
Yeah, they, in air quotes, don't want you to know the truth. And that's what struck me as I was doing my research. I was going straight to Robert Lifton's 8 Markers of Cults, because I thought you can just line these up.
Right
off the bat, you have immediately there's this orientation, this in-group, out-group, us versus them, which is very classic cult and religious type thinking. We're on the inside line, as you say. We know the truth. We've got a messiah figure. We've got Trump. He's working hard to bring the deep state down. Then you've got the sacred science, which is another one of Lifton's categories. The drops, I think Q's drops are really the sacred science. Like evangelicals read the Bible, or Scientologists might read Dianetics. They've got their sacred science. And as you say, someone needs to then parse those, explain them. So you need almost like a pastoral or priestly class.
Yeah, that's the part I find so fascinating about this, is that was organic. As far as I can tell. I mean, maybe it's a setup, but I don't think these people are bright enough to really be involved in this massive setup. I think this is the organically evolving part, is these speakers, these people, these interpreters, this rise of this priest class, as I've put it, right? Because that's what priests are. They're the interpreters of the word, right? They're the communicators between the all-powerful and us unwashed masses. And I think that's fascinating that has come up in this, that it's not people directly interpreting the Q drops, it's getting the word through these interpreters. Like, how do these guys know? How do they know? How do they know this stuff?
Well, there's one, probably the biggest one's a guy named Praying Medic on YouTube. Yeah. He's probably the biggest, if not the biggest, got a massive following. And he got in on it on the ground floor. And I guess he's some sort of evangelical Christian type guy. Originally, he started out posting videos about prayer warrior type stuff, demonic warfare and spiritual warfare. But not long after the first Q drop, he went all in on Q. And so he became, right off the bat, the expert, in air quotes. And he's like a spirit guide in a sense. Like, if you're new to the QAnon, you go to the Praying Medic because he can explain it, simplify it, and make it make sense for you. And that's another allure of the cult sort of psychology, isn't it? That it helps make sense of a chaotic world, a confusing world. In fact, one of the things we haven't talked about is when the lockdown occurred back around February, March, the QAnon stuff just exploded. And of course, a lot of it is tied into COVID-19 conspiracy theories as well, the pandemic sort of thinking. Either it's a complete hoax, there is no virus at all, or somehow it was planned and released into the world by probably this cabal or shadowy figures with an intent to either bring down Trump's presidency or somehow cripple the economy of the world so that maybe China ends up on top. You can spin it off into any number of theories, but they say that in articles I've read, what really fueled it, people had time because they were sitting at home that they never had before. They were bored. They were restless. They were looking for answers. There was a lot of uncertainty out there. We didn't know what was going on. And they got into Q and boom, here's all the answers. It's a pandemic. It's a hoax. And of course, Trump didn't help by saying it's a Democrat hoax and refusing to wear a mask and pushing black cures and all that. He did.
He gave it oxygen with every one of those statements. And every time he was pushing hydroxychloroquine, and every time he was pushing alt remedies, and every time he was pushing theories. I don't know that he ever said the word hoax, but I do know that he definitely downplayed the importance and seriousness of it for months.
He said it was a Democrat hoax in the sense that not that the virus was a hoax, but that they were somehow using it to hurt his presidency and his re-election chances. He definitely used the words Democrat hoax in relation to COVID. And there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was one time he came to a press briefing months ago wearing a yellow tie. I don't know if you picked up on this, but the QAnon people went crazy over this because normally he wears a red tie. And they were like, that's a signal. It's actually linked to like a flag on a ship. You know how ships, they used to wave flags to other ships and there were signal flags. Apparently the yellow flag means something and the yellow tie means, it's all a hoax, so it's all true. Trump's really in on the inside line. I mean,
right.
Where does it end?
Well, with this kind of thinking, there's really no dot that can't be connected to any other dot. And that's the danger of conspiracy theories, is what it does to your thinking, because it really, really degrades a person's ability to think critically. And critical thinking is using logic and reason in a sequential fashion in order to figure things out. If you're really going to, it's kind of like logic, right? It's like, what are you trying to do? So conspiracy theorists can use critical thinking. They can reason their way through a set of facts. The problem is that what they don't understand about the process is that it is motivated reasoning. And this is a technical term. Motivated reasoning is when you are logically thinking things through to a conclusion you want to come to. So confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance and all these other things we talk about come into play here. But really, it's a matter of you have the end already, the conclusion's already figured out, and so now the facts are all going to line up to get to that conclusion. And that's the method of their thinking. And that's what they don't understand about critical thinking, is they think that they are critical thinkers, and they will tell you for hours about how they are critical thinking and show you how they are applying the principles of critical thinking. They will apply logical fallacies, they will apply argument and rhetoric themes and ideas, but they're missing the most fundamental part of the whole picture, which is that critical thinking is not about having a conclusion and driving all the facts to that conclusion. It's the exact opposite. It's, here are all the facts, and now we need a conclusion that explains all of them, not selectively figuring out which ones are the right facts, the true facts, and everything else is fake news because it just doesn't align with your conclusion, your end view. Your Pizzagate, QAnon, flat Earth, whatever, choose your flavor of conspiracy. It's what I'm saying is true for all of it,
Absolutely. One thing I'm finding fascinating too is how the QAnon stuff is spreading in the evangelical Christian community. I've read some articles about this. I don't know if you've come across this, but pastors are tearing their hair out now because they're saying, okay, these people, like I said, they were sitting at home. They're doing virtual church, if anything, on Zoom or Skype or whatever. And they're passing these conspiracy theory videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter and other social media around the congregation. And the pastors can't get their hands on how to stop this. They can't get their heads around this thing. And it's fascinating because I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and we were saying, the thing about Christianity, I think, is it already predisposes people to accept conspiracy theories. I read an article where people who believe in the young earth creationism, for example, studies have shown they're more likely to believe conspiracy theories. And the reason for that is that it's called teleological thinking, the idea that there's nothing random. There's always a reason. There's a why things happen. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing happens randomly. There's a force, there's a power behind everything. And of course, in the Christian world, that's God. And in the conspiracy theory, that's the shadowy cabal. And so they're more susceptible to believing conspiracy theories. There's also an element of apocalypticism where there's going to be this great, storm. Trump's going to unveil everything. They're all going to get their just reckoning. And that ties into Christian theology as well.
Oh, huge.
That's straight into Book of Revelation.
Exactly. It's totally analogous with that. And this is a pattern of thinking. And this is inculcated in evangelicals almost from childhood. And you and I have talked about the dangers of this. And I actually have said out loud and will continue to say that I believe religious indoctrination of young children is tantamount to child abuse.
It is.
Because you're instilling ideas of a very forceful and broad worldview nature. Not just talking about an opinion about whether these, whether you like black headphones or red headphones. We're talking about, the nature of life itself and the universe. And when you're feeding, faith-based ideas to children who cannot think critically about them, it's just simply impossible for them to. Then they're just little sponges, and they're just soaking that information up. And this has drastic consequences on their future worldview and their future actions. And so I have real problem with that. But also everything you said here, but the modeling of all of this is same, very, very analogous, right? Because this whole QAnon thing is about how Trump is going to eventually save the day. That's really the narrative. The narrative is, here's all these awful people doing all these awful things to children, especially, which everybody gets on board with. I mean, if you want to get anywhere with Scientology activism, you will get 20 yards farther talking about the child abuse of Scientology, which is very real.
Oh, absolutely.
And you
Same
will
as evangelicalism.
Yeah, then you will talking about the abuse that is rained down on adults, which is legion, right? You get all of that. So we have this narrative that Trump is going to ride in and save the day, and there are two things that this hinges on, I think, in terms of kind of logically sort of parsing this out as to how could this happen. There's two things that I think that are necessary in the mindset of a QAnon believer, and that is, one, the infallibility of Trump, similar to the infallibility of Christ, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Right? And two, and I think this is fundamental, and I don't know that I've seen this in any of the reporting on this, but I believe from everything I've looked at with conspiracy theories and kind of psychologically walking this back, I believe that this is true. That the anchor on which this entire thing rests is the anti-authority, anti-science, like distrust of our government first, science second, authority figures, third, right? Just distrust of authority overall. Distrust of authority is something you can walk back to, millennia, right? But this concentration on fake news, on anti-science, on anti-knowledge, this seems to be something I think that's really been building for the last couple decades. I think this is an outgrowth of news, of our media, of social movements, of some of the rhetoric that comes out of churches, of course, evangelicals, right? Because it's not the government's going to save you. It's the churches. It's God, right? Don't look to the government for anything. And the very real, of course, actions that our government has taken over the decades too, to create and sow distrust and, the lies, the corruption, the scandals, all the, just the tons and tons of stuff. I believe that created a fertile ground for the conspiracy theories to grow. I think without that, yeah, exactly. I think we have a concatenation of events here, and I think that the basic sowing the seeds that we've been doing for decades now of distrust in our government, our leaders, our laws, that now it's coming out with the police as well through the whole BLM thing. Really, yes, the police have issues, but huge issues. I mean, huge. like systemic issues.
Systemic racism. Killing black people.
Yeah, huge problems. But we're not going to solve those problems by just, pointing a fire hose at the obvious problems. We got to dig deeper. And I think that this business of the anti-authority, anti-science, anti-fact, kind of sentiment that has been being cultivated here in the United States, like very, very carefully. And I believe that this is now up to a bonfire level where, maybe in decades past, it was just a little smoking fire and it was getting some oxygen, blowing on it. Now it's...
Yeah, it's a raging dumpster fire.
Exactly. So between that effort, which is pre-internet, I mean, this goes way back. Then you get the internet. Then you get the rise of echo chambers and the sharing of information amongst people all over the world who have these crazy ideas, but now they find community online because they couldn't find it in person. And I think these things are all coming together, a perfect storm, like as you say, to create these conspiracies. QAnon is really a conspiracy theory at the same kind of level as Flat Earth. And if you dig into Flat Earth, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a deep conspiracy theory. It is not just the Earth is flat and science is lying to us. It is a huge worldwide look at, hundreds, millions of people involved in the conspiracy. QAnon quickly goes in that same direction.
Yeah, in air quotes, don't want you to know the truth. That's the thing. And I was thinking about this too. Another aspect of this cult psychology is that the QAnon conspiracy, probably like the Flat Earth thing and others, it offers an instant sense of community. And that's a big draw. I'm part of the community. I understand the Q drops. I can parse them. I can make sense of them and thereby the world. But of course, going along with that is, what Lifton calls the dispensing of existence, which is the downside, isn't it? Yes, you can be part of the QAnon community and be accepted. You can go to Trump rallies and wear your Q shirt and wave your "We Are Q" flags and be accepted. Yeah,
big
and you're
cardboard
seeing,
Q
yeah.
out. Yeah,
and people know they've got cryptic slogans on the signs, and they know that's part of the insider loaded language, isn't it? But what
right.
I read an article in Vice the other day, and it was really fascinating because it was talking about the real world consequences of relationships that have been destroyed, irrevocably destroyed, when one person in the relationship just gets totally into QAnon and their personalities change. It's like a religious conversion experience, and they just become consumed by it to the point where the other person, it's like, I don't even recognize this person anymore. All they want to do is rant about the cabal, the deep state, and,
Right.
cues, the drops, and, want me to get into it. And it's led to divorces and, broken relationships and family members falling out. And so you think, okay, there's the downside of the whole cult psychology. At the end of it all is the dispensing of existence. So this is a damaging thing for sure.
Oh, big time. Huge. All the cult markers are there.
Mm-hmm.
And the cult/religious conversion process is where it's really strongest.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when they have had their quote unquote awakening.
Yeah.
And the awakening is really what feeds into the continuation of it. I mean, you can really self-radicalize. It's really quite something on YouTube, on the internet. And this is one of the, well, I won't go into that right now. Anyway, just
leave that for now.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm not gonna go there.
Don't touch it, man.
I was gonna make a broader statement about YouTube, but I'm not gonna do that. So this awakening thing is important though, because it gives this power base to the person where. And if you look at the Vice article, by the way, because I was looking at this too, there's a little video interview that they did with a couple of folks there were a couple of Vice articles on this actually. So one of them had this video. Oh yeah, here it is. I think this is the one. This is it. People tell us how QAnon destroyed their relationships.
Yeah, that's right? What I was referring to.
Article. Yeah, and because Vice has done a few articles on this. And the thing I found fascinating, of course, watching the video couple who are strong QAnon supporters and are very open about it, was the certainty that they feel about how now, when there's a news cycle, they get to nudge, wink, wink each other about how they know what's really going on, right? Like this idea that this guy felt so empowered by learning that the media get all their talking points at 4 a.m. And you're like,
okay,
yeah, like that's the news. That's how it's done. Like incidents occur. The AP and other general, news guys report on the facts of it, and then that goes around to all the news outlets all over, and they start their day and have their news stories, and the editors look at them and go, okay, here's how we're going to report on this, and here's how we're going to report on this. And this guy is sort of thinking, oh yeah, there's this big master plot where everybody's given their talking points. As though all of journalism is involved in this big cabal where they all meet at Starbucks every morning and get their talking points distributed to them or something. And it's this Simple Simon worldview that is fed by these conspiracy theories, by QAnon, by Flat Earth. QAnon especially, it loves this stuff. It loves Simple Simon explanations for things. So when people feel empowered, they feel they've woken, and then they feel empowered by this knowledge. No wonder you can't talk facts or sense to them or get them to change their minds. They feel like they are more in charge and more in control of their life than they ever have been. And you're going to take that away from them by pointing out some inconsistency, some contradiction? Forget it.
And they can explain all that away.
Yeah, they're going to blow you off in a microsecond because they feel powerful now. They feel like they're in control. They can watch the news cycle and know things about what's going on that everybody else doesn't really know.
They've got the inside line.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I've been drunk on that. I mean, not information, power, this is, this can be very, very invigorating or intoxicating. And this is where these people's heads are at. And I think we forget that because we look at the facts that they're espousing and we go, that's nuts. How could you possibly believe blue is red? How could you possibly believe that? That's crazy. It's blue, it's not red. And guy's like, no, it's red, man. I'm telling you, it's red. And because of the fact that I can see that it's red, I can see more than you can.
Absolutely.
I can see past the blue. I can see what's really going on. I mean, tell me how anybody's going to just give that up. Of course they're not. They're going to fight about
tooth
that.
and nail.
And this is why couples are breaking up, families are breaking up. I mean, this is the same. It's same as, Trump's a good guy taken to 100x steroid level. That's what this is.
It is crazy. I mean, that sense of cognitive dissonance, I'm finding that fascinating. All this stuff about the prophecies that didn't come true or whatever predictions haven't happened. Nope, you can't believe it. Fake news. He's using deception. Even the fake news narrative, that's in and of itself, that is a conspiracy theory. The idea that somehow the media outlets are conspiring together to release stories that are utterly false.
Yep.
That's a conspiracy theory.
That's
when
right.
Trump says, oh, fake news, you go, well, you can't combat against that because they, again, don't want you to know the truth.
Right. Well, and that exactly like you just said, that is so spot on because it is that sentiment upon which all of this is built. The media cannot rely on the media for the truth. You cannot rely on our leaders for the truth. So we have to look for other sources. Who are we going to? Who's out there loudly telling the world that they know what's up?
But this
Alex
is the
Jones,
problem.
David Icke.
That's what I was going to say.
Right? Like these crazy people have these worldviews that are absolutely whack. And people worship at the altar of Jones and Icke and Molyneux because this worldview explains things in a way that they can understand, where the media and the leaders and everything, they're just confusing. I don't understand them because they say things that confuse me, that don't seem to be true, that was a lie, so therefore everything he said is, I can't believe. Well, okay. I mean, politicians, but okay. I mean, there are ways of dealing with the levels of nuance of dishonesty from politicians without having to, run to Alex Jones. So I wanted to make a point, though. I was going on a little rant there, but there was another point about this which I think is really important, and that is that one of the things that happens with conspiracy theorists, cultists, people who are engaged in motivated reasoning is that bugs become features, and features become bugs. This is a pseudoscience thing that kind of happens in the world of alt health and alternative, and pseudoscience and stuff. You get these, this is, like some medicine or something or some new remedy or something. And you go, well, yeah, but this hasn't been tested by the FDA. And that's a bug, but then it becomes a feature. Oh, yeah, because the FDA is corrupt. And the FDA is only signing off on the stuff that's killing you, and this is the stuff that's saving you. So of course the FDA doesn't want to have anything to do with it. The spin, right? Every bug actually becomes a feature, and every feature becomes a bug. So it's kind of opposite world. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's part of the motivated reasoning. It is hard to overestimate how far people can go. Now.
Absolutely, and we've seen it in destructive cults. Obviously, the case studies of Jonestown and the Heaven's Gate and some of the other places, they'll go that far. Someone's willing to get in their car and ram another car in order to save the children. They'll do anything, literally.
That's
so
right.
I hope
the Pizzagate thing where the guy was willing to go shoot up a place.
Yeah,
I mean that's real world. The guy walked into this pizza parlor one fine day with a gun. And started firing because he thought he was going in to save people. I mean, he didn't do it out of malice. He did it because he thought he was going to save kids.
Really did, yeah. You could say his motives were genuine in that sense. He bought into the conspiracy. And he was an evangelical Christian too. So the whole circle comes around.
That's right.
Well, I hope that people that have listened to this episode, I hope that they are well, I don't know who we're talking to. That's the thing. Are we talking to people who are, they're probably the Trump supporting QAnon person's not even going to listen to this episode.
Yeah,
but what
not.
I'm thinking is that the person who is listening to us talk about this is giving them education. It's giving them perhaps some ammunition to be able to get their heads around what's going on, how it sort of works psychologically. So
Right.
I really appreciate you, Chris, taking the time out to kind of help me work through this, dissect it, unpick it, and sort of make some sense of it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for the opportunity. And if I could, I would like to definitely include this in the episode so that we can give people who are listening to this perhaps a little bit of what to do, because please do not, please do not argue, antagonistically confront, or try to, talk sense to your QAnon friends or family if you are unfortunately in the position of having them, because that's not how you're going to change their minds. You cannot argue them out of this. It's a much craftier. It's like a cult intervention. It's way more involved in that. When you've got somebody that far down a rabbit hole that they are really telling you that they really believe that there is this cabal of pedophile Democrats and all this other stuff, and they really have bought into that. Not just they're kind of thinking about it or it's a little goofy, but I mean, once they've accepted it, you got a lot of work you're going to have to do to untangle that, because the roots of it for them psychologically are going to be individual for them. Mm-hmm. We're talking in broad strokes, but each individual has their own thing. So I just wanted to stress that, because I know some people think they get all, I got all the facts, now I'm going to go talk some sense to my friend. And I'm telling you, it's going to backfire probably 99% of the time. I mean, maybe you'll have success, but that would be an outlier. Most of the time you're not. You're going to make it worse. So
it's gotten so bad. I mean, I've had to block and delete friends off of social media that we're going way back 20 years of friendship where they've bought into the QAnon stuff, the Trump stuff. And you can't have a conversation. You just can't. I had to delete a lady the other day because she started talking about, well, if I get in my car and I'm driving my way to work and these Black Lives Antifa people get in my way and I need to get to work, I'm damn sure going to run their asses over.
Right.
This is supposedly a Christian lady. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she, well, because it's not really Black Lives Matter. It's a white terrorist thing. It's Antifa. And she started spouting all the QAnon stuff. I'm like, oh, my God. You can't have a reasonable conversation. So you're going to run somebody over with your car if they step in your way because you've bought into the whole thing. And you've eaten the red pill, So
exactly.
Crazy stuff.
Isn't that what they call it? Don't they call it getting red pilled?
Yeah, red pilling. That's an actual term. So
they ripped that off from the MRAs, though, didn't they? Wasn't it the MRAs who, the men's rights activists who were doing the red pilling to start with?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know that much about it.
I'm only laughing because there was a documentary called The Red Pill.
All right.
And it's an MRA documentary. It's a men's rights thing. And the men's rights guys are their own set of interesting things. But anyway, red pilling. Yeah, fun stuff. So there are, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's nothing you can do. I'm saying that it's important that you prepare yourself for how to deal with somebody who is in an extremist mindset. Mm-hmm. Because it's not something you're going to talk them out of in an hour. And it's not something you're going to talk them out of by giving them a bunch of facts, because facts are not what got them there in the first place.
Yeah.
They didn't get into it because of facts, so you're not going to walk them out of it with facts alone. There's an emotional investment, and unless you deal with that emotional investment and the motivated reasoning and what the motivation is, you won't pop the conspiracy theory. And if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to dig a little bit.
Best of luck.
Figure that out. So I just wanted to say that because I want to put that out there for people. That it's not hopeless. It's not there's nothing you can do. It's not that you have to block all of them. It's just if you want to deal with it, you're going to have to do it right, or you're going to make it worse because they will double down on their belief, and then you've made it worse.
Exactly. They're going to dig in deeper. I think that's right. I would say the purpose of this conversation was to educate people, as you say, who have friends, family members who are fully buying into the QAnon stuff or who are considering it. And it gives them the ammunition, the education to be able to approach them and say, okay, this person is basically a cultist. That's the sort of mentality, the psychology I'm dealing with. And so you have to know how to approach that person. You can't just go in there and blow them out with logic. That's not going to work, as you say. They're just gonna double down. So thank you so much, Chris. I've absolutely enjoyed chatting with you once again. Let's not make it so long next time.
Right. Yeah, we'll do this again sometime soon.